On June 28, 1925, David Livingstone's forerunner appeared. Elizabeth, in trance, got up, walked about the room, stamped her foot, and for the first time in trance spoke, giving the name James White. July 3, 1925. These records mark the end of Stevenson's work alone. We have seen and noted Stevenson's increasing use of trance sleep for transmitting memory ideas. First one in one trance, then two ideas in one trance, then gradually a growing ability to handle three different memory-bearing streams in one deep trance. Stevenson's long period of preparation appears to have been designed for the following objective: the coming in of a second personality with his memories and visions, visions projected onto the mind of Elizabeth by some means of direct hypnotic or telepathic suggestion. Dr. Hamilton, when may visitors attend our circle? Non-contact raps. When materialization is visible and if all are interested. W.T. Stead. Why the steady growth of Stevenson's power to transmit memories and ideas through the Elizabeth sleep? At the beginning there was only one trance period, then two, then combined themes in a second trance sleep, themes which could be either closely related or totally separate depending on his choice. Script and vision could relate or be separate also. Looking back as we observe this faculty steadily increasing in strength and ingenuity, we have strong reason to conclude that it was purposive, a deliberate improvement of Elizabeth's responses so that trance 2 could be given over to another Scot, David Livingstone. David Livingstone made his first effort by speech and vision on July 5, 1925. Elizabeth reported her second trance vision. Then I saw Stevenson, and he took me into a house. I saw a form there, a ghost. I did not want to go in. Then we left there and walked until we came to the shore, and I saw a wreck there. This picture was awful. I did not like it. In her trance state, Elizabeth started suddenly, as if frightened, and nearly came out of trance. Her fear of the ghost was very real. This surely is near-perfect demonstration of a psychohypnotic impact. The ghost and the wreck match ideas found in the essay A Gossip on Romance. Stevenson was quite aware that the picture of the ghost and the shipwreck had really frightened Elizabeth. July 5, 1925, Elizabeth passes into second trance state, sleeps quietly for several minutes, then jumps up and walks in a mannish way about the room. She speaks in a hoarse, mannish voice. David Livingstone from Blantyre. Elizabeth becomes normal, describes her second trance vision. I don't mind the talk. I was at Blantyre the night. I was once through Blantyre on the train. Mind you, I saw Livingstone. It was Livingstone that talked. Was he lost? Well, somebody found him, some young lad. He was white. He was British anyway. I was in South Africa. The table levitated and inverted high into the cabinet. There was a blow on the cabinet as if made by a fist. At the sitting of July 9, 1925, Lillian Hamilton was at Victoria Beach. About 5 minutes after commencing, Elizabeth reported seeing figures and letters appearing in the air in front of her. 1813, ARCH, L3. I lost some of them, she said. Elizabeth now reports. I see a great bunch of men now standing right in front of me. I can tell two of them. There is Stevenson and David, that man I gave you on Sunday night, the dark fellow. And there is another one here. He is a stout man, dark hair and side whiskers. Oh, what a pretty place and bright. The light is bluish bright, bright. There are about 4 or 5 men, 4 anyway. Their faces are shining as if a light were standing in front of them. There is that other one coming. Later to the question she responded, "I saw nothing but them, no trees or grass. They were not in this world, not in such bright light as that." Elizabeth, now passing into another deep trance, sits quiet for about 2 minutes, then rises from her chair, stamps her foot very vigorously on the floor, and walks about a little in a very determined manner. Elizabeth now slept for about 5 minutes. "Dr. Hamilton, who is this?" "Elizabeth, David." "Hamilton, David who?" "Elizabeth, David Livingston." "Hamilton, who else?" "Elizabeth, Stanley." "What Stanley?" "Horton." "Dr. Hamilton, spell it." "Elizabeth, Horton." The Encyclopedia Britannica gives the name as Henry Morton Stanley. "Dr. Hamilton, what else?" "Elizabeth, 1872, 53 years ago, I was sick." "Dr. Hamilton, I was sick?" "Elizabeth, yes, Abbey, England." Elizabeth suddenly regains consciousness and finds to her surprise that she is standing beside Dr. Hamilton and asks, "Where am I? What am I doing here?" Elizabeth, now normal, reports second transvision. "I saw too much. I saw Livingston. He has got a sore arm, bitten, his left arm. He showed it to me. He took his coat sleeve up and showed it to me. Some beast bit it. He said what bit it. I don't know now. I saw the blood. He was sick. I saw him. There was a lot of men with him. They were all dark men. I don't mind any whites. The black men were good to him. I saw a lot of figures. I can't remember all I saw. I did not see the beast that bit him. It is his left arm. It was between the elbow and the wrist. There was also blood on it. I don't know where I was at the start. Too many things happened and too many places. It was not steady. It's not like Stevenson's work. I crossed the ocean with Livingston. I did not cross it in the boat. I was first away in a real thick bush with just a footpath in it. It was there I got him holding his arm. He was alone except for some other body, and these dark men flocked around him. Then I got close up to him, but he does not look well. He's awful white, sickish looking. After he showed me the arm, I can't tell what happened. Some others came with us over the ocean. The ocean looked natural, but he came to a great big city. He did not go to Scotland. I think in England. I seemed to walk across the ocean as over a floor. He did not say much as we went. On inquiry the day after this sitting, I found that Elizabeth knew practically nothing of Livingston. She was aware of his having been a missionary to Africa. She never knew of the injury to his arm, nor how the accident happened. Of Stanley she knew absolutely nothing. The name to her was entirely new. Her own naive description of the lion attack at once reveals her very limited knowledge. Here the new communicator makes his first attempt to have the imagery conform to the message with the brief notes of England. This is not wholly successful. Verification. David Livingston was found by Stanley on October 1871. He was ill in 1872 and died May 1st, 1873. Buried in Westminster Abbey, April 18, 1874. Bitten in the left arm. Correct. On July 19, 1925, Livingston instead appeared. Photoplate exposed in darkness for Stead. Dr. Hamilton, from your point of view, what is the purpose of the Stevenson and Livingston visions and messages? Non-contact raps, to enlighten the world. WTS. July 26, 1925. Vision of Stevenson and then Livingston appeared. Vision, I don't know where I am. I was away in some wilderness. I saw some men. I think they were slaves by the way they were dressed. I saw that man, David Livingston. He was in a tent and he came out and talked to me. Verification. This is probably another reference to Arabs making slaves of the natives. David Livingston hated this bitterly. W.T. Stead came around and did some raps, not recorded. July 30, 1925. Trance 2, Elizabeth sleeps, then gets up from her chair, walks excitedly around the room, then speaks. Dr. Hamilton, who are you? Elizabeth, Livingston. What have you to tell us? Chamala, phonetic Luluama, Lolo, 1873, April 29. Second transvision. I saw a man in his bed. He was Livingston. There was a young man beside him. He went for water. There were other red men. They seemed real kind to the one who was in bed. The tent was on something, for they were carrying it to near where there was water. Verification. David Livingston on April 29, 1873 crossed the river Lulimali and proceeded to the village of the chief Chitambo. He was very ill and carried by his servants, one of whom was named Chuma. He became very thirsty and asked for water. Some of his servants went on ahead to find some and met them returning from the village with the water he so much desired. This is from the last journals, page 408. Comment. Excellent correspondence between message ideas and statements in the book. August 2nd, 1925. Vision with Stevenson, then Elizabeth. Second transvision. I don't know where I was. I saw two men. They were in white clothes, and so was the woman. There were 3 or 4 kiddies and natives carrying handles and grips. I saw that man Livingston. He is not as tall as Stevenson. He did not talk to me. Verification. Having returned to Kolobeng, I remained there until April 1815 in company with Mrs. Livingston and our 3 children and Chief Seychelles, in order to cross the Zonga at its lower end. I took Mrs. Livingston about 6 miles from the town so that she might have a peep at the broad part of the lake, Lake Nagami. Next morning we had other work to do, for my little boy and girls were seized with fever. All our servants were down with the same complaint. This is from Missionary Travels, page 64 and 5. Mr. Oswald, an English traveler, joined Livingston later on the Zorga River. Failing to meet the chief Sebetuana, the party returned to Livingston's home at Kolobeng. Mrs. Livingston is Mary Moffat, doctor of the African missionary Reverend Moffat. Mr. Oswald and Mr. Murray were 2 English travelers. There is limited agreement with the evidence given in the vision compared to that in this book. August 9, 1925, first transcript. I was sent away in a university, and there were 2 men there with Stevenson. They seemed to be his teachers. Stevenson was in his teens, not 20. He was sitting himself reading books. Verification. Fleming Jenkins, noted for his work in engineering and applied electricity, was one of Stevenson's closest friends in his early days. When Jenkins, then 35, became professor of engineering at Edinburgh University, Stevenson was supposed to be studying to qualify himself for his father's calling. Actually, Jenkins' first relation with Stevenson was to remonstrate on his persistent absence from classes. From this unpromising beginning developed an intimacy of which Stevenson long afterward wrote in a letter to Sir Sidney Colvin, "I owe you and Fleming Jenkins, the 2 older men who took the trouble and knew how to make a friend of me, everything that I have or own." And trans 2, David speaks, Tanganyika, Ujiji, 1869. I saw some men with things rolled about their heads. Were these Arabs? I saw some awfully deep boats. I saw some houses near a shore. I did not speak to anyone. Verification. At last he reached the great Arab settlement of Ujiji on the eastern shore of Tanganyika. This is from the last journal, page 21. August 13, 1925, first transvision. I saw Stevenson with his carpet bag and his big Highland cloak on and a soft hat on his head, no shape. I went off in the same train, and then I was away and I saw a marriage. It was Stevenson's marriage. He could have been better dressed. She is medium-sized, only saw her back. Verification. The story of Stevenson's journey to California to meet the woman he loved is here continued. The marriage took place May 1880. Did Stevenson wear a Highland cloak on this memorable journey? Lillian Hamilton's search through all available biographies failed to supply an answer. In July 1926, while visiting her parents in Los Angeles, California, Lillian wrote to Mrs. Salisbury Field in Santa Barbara, requesting the favor of a meeting with her. She was Stevenson's stepdaughter, formerly Isabel Strong, née Isabel Osborne. There were several questions to be asked. One was, did Stevenson arrive in California in 1879 wearing this type of garment? She assured Lillian Hamilton that he did. She vividly recalled his strange, to them, appearance wearing this cloak, a type of outer garment never seen in the West. At the time of his arrival, she was about 19 years old and recalled his strange dress clearly. She could not recall what his hat was like. Second transvision, unclear. David Livingstone, Tanganyika, caring for sick. August 17, 1925. At 9:30 p.m. the table comes out of the cabinet, non-contact. Soon the table is thrown about 3 feet up, feet foremost. At 9:42 the even levitation of about 2 feet. Raps by W.T. Stead. There's Stevenson. In trance 2, David Livingstone speaks through Elizabeth. Livingstone, David. Arab slaves, 1871, 54 years. March 14, lost all. Lualaba, slaves, canoe, wanted to borrow one, would not lend me. Second transvision. I was away in a wild place. I saw some men and went down to the water. I saw Livingstone talking to some Arabs. I saw men that looked like slaves. I was talking to both groups at the water. Livingstone was talking cross to them. Verification. March 11, 1871. The traders from Ujiji are simply marauders. I am forced to bargain with Kasanga for a canoe. Livingstone's purpose was to travel up the Lualaba River and so continue his exploration of the interior of Africa, particularly the sources of the Nile. Repeatedly, the natives refused to lend him a canoe or sell him one. Their minds were poisoned against him by slanders directed against him by the Arab slave traders who did not want him in their midst as a reputable witness of their terrible deeds. Delayed by lack of canoes for 3 months, he finally began his retreat to Ujiji, July 20, 1871, where he was found by Stanley in October 1871, sick, weary, and among enemies. This was a terrible time for Livingstone. 54 years is correct. August 27, 1925, first transcript. Amateur Immigrant, Thoreau, essay, where he became lonely and spent, nursed by wife when she had obtained her divorce. First transvision. I was away in a house and Stevenson was lying in bed. He was real sickly looking. A woman came, I think his wife, and she was looking after him. Everything was very poor. Verification. Mrs. Osborne obtained her divorce early in 1880 and moved to Oakland, California to live with her sister. Stevenson lived in lodgings in San Francisco. There, in March and April 1880, he became dangerously ill with tuberculosis and general collapse. He was nursed back to health by the doctors who attended him and by Mrs. Osborne. His lodging was very poor, for as yet he had little money, and Mrs. Osborne herself had little to go on. Stevenson and Mrs. Osborne were married in May 1880, so the script is not quite accurate in referring to Stevenson's wife. Just prior to this breakdown, Stevenson had read Thoreau's essays for the first time. He later published his essay on Thoreau. Trans 3. Speech, completely done up. Arrival of Stanley, sick. Bennett, a friend of Livingston, October 1871. In the third transvision, I was in a tent and I was away in Africa. He was on a stretcher and a young man came and he was looking to him. He came and he had a lot of papers. It was real warm. They brought Livingston food. Verification. Stanley found Livingston October 28, 1871. Bennett, evidently a reference to James Gordon Bennett, New York newspaperman who formed the Stanley Rescue Party in Africa. At that time, Stanley was in his late 30s, young compared to Livingston, who was 58. October 23, 1871, at dawn off Ujiji, welcomed by Arabs. I was now reduced to a skeleton. This is from the last journal, page 316. October 28, 1871. But when my spirits were at their lowest ebb, the Good Samaritan was at hand. Susie came running. An Englishman. I saw him. He was Henry Moreland Stanley, the traveling correspondent of the New York Herald, sent by James Gordon Bennett to obtain accurate information about me, if living, and if dead, to bring home my bone. The news he had to tell me, who had been 2 years without tidings from Europe, made my whole frame thrill, and revived emotions that had been dormant. Appetite returned. I ate 4 times daily, and in a week I began to feel strong. I was completely overwhelmed. From the last journals. The vision has David Livingstone in bed. In fact, although very weak and emaciated, he appears to have kept going. He met Stanley on his feet. The imagery used here represents Livingstone's weak condition. The contents of the scripts were not known to anyone present. The writing was done in complete darkness on sheets of paper numbered and initialed by Dr. Hamilton. No one read the script immediately after the experiment. Scripts remained unread for several days. It was our rule to allow several scripts to accumulate before they were deciphered, and the meaning of the whole Stevenson or Livingston output was examined in light of the discernible facts. In this way, no one anywhere knew what the communicators had given. This eliminated the possibility of any mental influence being exerted on the phenomena. The plan and the nature of the input and the output was solely the responsibility of the communicators. Note, the name is Henry Morton, not Moreland Stanley. From the first, Elizabeth appears to have gripped the name incorrectly. Here we have evidence of the power of the fixed idea in the entranced mind. September 13, 1925, impromptu sitting in a Minneapolis hotel. Trans 2. Elizabeth. Livingston, going home. December to England, went to Africa in 1841. 16 years away in Africa until 1857. Missionary travels. Explore. Second transvision. I am at a station. Livingston looks awful funny. Such an old-fashioned hat on his head. He seemed to have landed. The cars are smaller than they are here. Verification. Livingston is out by 1 year. He went to Africa in 1840, was in Africa 16 years, returned to England in 1856, arriving in England December 12, 1856. We left Mililani on the 12th of July and reached the Mauritians on the 12th of August, 1856. And on 12th of December was once more in dear old England. First transcript. University of Edinburgh, in the building, room, Robert Emmett. The verification from Stevenson. The Speculative Society is a body of some antiquity and has counted among its members Scott, Robert Emmett, and by an accident of It has rooms in the very building of the University of Edinburgh. This is from a college magazine, from Memories and Portraits, page 62. Stevenson was a member of the debating society when a student at University of Edinburgh. Note the flag which was placed over Stevenson's body in the great hall in his home in Samoa now hangs on the wall of this hall in Edinburgh, in memory of the fame which he brought in later days to his old debating society. Elizabeth speaks. I have wondered where I am. Dr. Hamilton, who are you? Elizabeth, David Livingstone. Elizabeth staggers as she walks about the room. The second trance vision. I saw David Livingstone. He was dazed. He staggered when he walked and looked around. He tried to find out where he was. I saw Stevenson in a university building. It was big. He was arguing with some men. He spoke to me. Livingstone came there and spoiled his picture. We know two things. There is no spoken message from David. The two in one trance appear to give Elizabeth a sense of confusion. Livingstone fails to produce a memory item. Does the psychohypnotic theory cover all of these matters? Note that the more experienced communicator, Stevenson, was fairly successful in getting his message through, his script giving enough words to identify the literary source. The vision was complementary, therefore the whole was definitely planned. But we have another new problem. Was the vision of a dazed, staggering David Livingstone a mental illusion signifying fact, or was the non-physical, spiritual being actually dazed, as he appeared to be? This forces us to ask the question, does the psychohypnotic hypothesis cover all the facts of this impact? One gets the impression that in his first attempt to enter the Stevenson trance, David was actually mentally upset by his experience. Is this due to too close a contact with the Stevenson personality? We cannot answer with any degree of certainty here, but more attempts of this kind were to come. To Elizabeth there were always two Stevensons and two Livingstones. There was the one who was in the picture, and whom she recognized as a picture only, a hallucination. Then there was the one who was real, the spiritual entity, who had a form like a man, whom she saw at times enter the room, come near her, smile at her. She would remark, "This is the real Stevenson, the real Livingstone." Elizabeth maintained this attitude throughout, and gradually, on fair evidence, we came to believe that her distinction rested on more than only a hallucination which was passed on to her by her communicators. This opens up a vast field for original study. An editorial comment here. After Dr. Hamilton made his transition, he came back to Lillian to report experiences on the other side, which led him to a similar state of puzzlement. September 20, 1925, Elizabeth sees letters of light. Then Elizabeth in trance walks about the room. Dr. Hamilton, who is here? Elizabeth, David Livingstone at Kolobang. This is confused. Elizabeth, when normal, reports. Stevenson and Livingstone were here together. Stevenson came first, and then the other, and then the Indians, meaning natives. I know Livingstone did not get through by my throat. I was in a sunny land, and then it got dark. Stevenson went aside, and the darkness covered him. Elizabeth always complained of a dry, sore throat after David Livingstone had spoken, although she carried no memory of the message. The voice was hers, but changed to sound deep, hoarse, and mannish. Livingstone appears again and writes, David, my grandfather, Highland, came to Blantyre, near Glasgow, as he had a large family. Verification from David Livingstone. Finding his farm in Ulna insufficient to support a numerous family, My grandfather removed to Blantyre Works, a large cotton manufactory on the Clyde above Glasgow. After his script, Elizabeth fell into a quiet, deep sleep. Then she wrote for Stevenson these words. Here he wrote, incorrigible truant, loaf and defy. Becoming normal again, she said, I was away in the old land. I had Stevenson first, and then Livingston came. He is determined. Lillian's comments. Livingston fails to give complementary facts in the vision. And the communicators change places, Livingston in trance 1, Stevenson in trance 2. The confusion still remains. At this experiment, the physical phenomena were very powerful. Elizabeth, on her chair, was pulled violently about the room both before and after the Livingston and Stevenson transmissions. September 24, 1925, second transcript. Elizabeth, David Livingston, slaves of native heather, the Boers, put away English traders, 1841, Seychelles. The second transvision. Elizabeth sees little black children with very little on. Verification. Boers make slaves of the natives. I have myself been an eyewitness to Boers coming to a village and demanding 20 or 30 women to weed in their gardens, and I have seen these women proceed to the scene of unrequited toil, carrying their own food on their backs and their children, and instruments of labor on their shoulders. But why is the name Seychelles included? Seychelles was a noted and powerful back-range chief. He was Livingston's friend. He defied the Boers who had demanded that he stop English traders from proceeding into the country with firearms for sale. Seychelles replied, I was made an independent chief by God and not by you. The English are my friends. From Missionary Travels, page 32. The association of these memories is strictly in line with Livingston's recorded facts. September 27, 1925, first transvision. Stevenson was in university, talking to some men. Livingston came in with his wife and 3 children. They are going somewhere. Trance 2, Livingston's first writing. Wife and children, Seychelles, in wagon of his own. Elizabeth, Kolobeng, Chief Seychelles, wife and children. Second transvision. I saw Livingston and a woman with children. I saw them going away in the wagon, big oxen attached, and a big chief in the wagon. It was warm and sunny. It is interesting to note that Vision 1, which belongs to Stevenson, shows Livingston imagery which anticipates the vision of Trance 2, dominated by Livingston. Verification. Having returned to Kolobeng, I remained there until April 19 and then left in company with our 3 children, Mrs. Livingston and Chief Seychelles, who had brought a wagon of his own. This is from Missionary Travels, page 64. Note the correspondence between fact and imagery, in both a chief riding in a wagon. Best so far from Livingston. In the vision, the wife and children ride with the chief. In Livingston's narrative, this is not suggested or stated, and probably did not take place. October 6, 1925. In a letter to the Crandons, their first visit to the Crandons. There's a Canadian Medical Association meeting in Montreal, November 2nd and 3rd, and Dr. Hamilton writes, I might say that we are still continuing our own investigations and have now had an experience of about 300 trances with our best medium, witnessing a great deal of phenomena, both telekinetic and mental, and also materializations producing wax finger forms. We feel that this work is extremely important, far more so than the general public and many of our best scientists as yet realized, and any opportunity, therefore, of widening our experience, you may be sure, will be greatly appreciated. October 8, 1925. By Raps, W.T. Stead gives instructions retrying to get photographs by influencing photoplates in darkness by supernormal means. On this date, Sir Oliver Lodge, speaking at the London City Temple, had this to say: "I know that there are beings in the universe much higher than man, and that we are surrounded by a multitude of helpers interested in our struggles, keen to assist this race to get the benefit of its birthright and to fulfill its destiny. I believe that the higher powers have in store for man, both as an individual and as a race, something beyond anything we can imagine. It is evident to me that the race has risen because the higher powers took an interest in us and were filled with a passion for self-sacrifice on our behalf." October 13, 1925. While this sitting was taking place, Dr. Hamilton was in Boston. Raps give the message: "Margaret, sister." This is probably Dr. Hamilton's sister, who died at age 26 in Saskatoon, 1885. Elizabeth sees a young lady. Trance 2. Vision in Africa with red men. Elizabeth speaks of the Boers of the mountain colony, Kashan district, also of Con or Donner, and of white troubles. Verification from Missionary Travels, page 25. David Livingstone now is able to follow fairly well in the pattern Stevenson has established. That is, he selects his basic recorded set of facts and indicates them in a telegram-like fashion in vision and script. He uses as few words as possible, thus saving psychic energy. The vision of this date can be regarded as relatively unimportant. The script appears to be evidential of the Livingstone of life. At the time of the sitting of October 13, 1925, Dr. Glenn Hamilton found himself in the city of Boston. He was privileged not only to be a house guest of Dr. and Mrs. Crandon, but also to attend a number of sittings. Here are his own words describing his experiences. Previous to this time, I had known Dr. Crandon both through his writings on surgical subjects and as a Harvard clinician, and was now indeed delighted to find in the psychic researcher as true a scientist as had been made manifest in the eminent surgeon. During my stay in Boston, I attended in all 8 sittings and saw, under satisfactory control, many of the brilliant phenomena associated with Marjorie. I repeatedly witnessed successful manipulation of the donut, apparently by a teleplasmic terminal. I observed the intermittent ringing of the Scientific American bell box in good red light and without any visible contact, and as well I saw and felt ectoplasmic structures which, to my mind, were undoubtedly of psychic origin. In addition, I was privileged to take part in the tete-a-tete test with Dr. Richardson's justly famous voice cutout machine, and found it to be absolutely fraud-proof and 100% effective in proving the independence of the Walter voice. I witnessed a number of other successful tests with this machine. At one of these sittings, I witnessed also one of the most arresting incidents in my research experience, a trance so profound that the medium's respirations were reduced to 6 to the minute. To the layman, perhaps this is of little significance, but to one accustomed to watching for signs of danger and deep anesthesia, an occurrence of this nature is indeed an exceedingly alarming one. Undoubtedly, this affords a very strong additional proof of the genuineness of the Marjorie mediumship. November 16, 1925, Trance 1. First trance script. At the age of 13, he described the people of Peebles. "Bid you go to sleep and not bother your head. He will look after your playthings himself." The first trance vision. He was there and his nurse, and they were working with the books. His nurse has some arguing with him, and then I saw her taking him to his bedroom, and after she got him there, she began to gather up his things. Toys and a wooden horse and a small ship and some books and a bridge made of wood. She left a candle with him in the bedroom. It was burning when I last saw it. Verification. Before the age of 13, he described the inhabitants of Peebles in the style of the Book of Snobs. See Balfour, Volume 1, page 65. David Livingstone, second transcript. Held over the dead their carnival. He speaks. Bastama, Kopana River, Lake Nagami, flowers liver-colored, 1853. Repeat. I was away at two places. I was at some kind of fair or carnival. They were holding it where they had been burying somebody. It was not to say a graveyard. I could see no stones or signs of it. Then I saw that other man, not Stevenson, down at the water. A lot of dark men and such a curious-looking boat. Verification. Having remained 5 days with their wretched backwains, seeing the effects of war, we prepared to depart on the 15th of January, 1853. Several dogs had taken up their residence at the water. It was plain that they had held over the dead their carnival. On the way from Kopeng along the ancient riverbed, which forms a pathway to Botlanama, I found a species of cactus, being the third I had seen in the country, one at Lake Nagami, the flower of which was liver-colored. This is from Missionary Travels, page 118. Comment. Here Livingstone's use of imagery is almost equal to Stevenson's inventive skill. First, it takes the idea of a carnival, and Elizabeth gets the idea, a carnival held where there has been death. But this was no burying ground. She unerringly picks up this rather abstract idea. Carnival and death are subtly indicated. The water is a reminder of the river of the text, the Kopang. Each in his own trance has reached the highest point of imaginative, evidential concepts yet offered. One cannot imagine two more diverse streams of memory flowing through one entranced mind, these two being Peebles and the unseen playmate for Stevenson, and the hungry dogs that feed on carrion, an African river and flowers for Livingstone. November 22, 1925, Elizabeth went into deeper trance than usual. I have been far away. I saw Stevenson and Livingstone. They were pulling one another away. I saw Stevenson as a little boy and his nurse wrapping him up. He was in a carriage. They went up the street. But Livingstone was there too, in a cloud. Trance 2, David Livingstone. Elizabeth walks about the room, speaks as Livingstone. Elizabeth says she has seen Bushmen and a British man and Stevenson. Sabituana, Kopolo, tribe, Colin Mackenzie. When Elizabeth awakens from trance sleep, she says she has seen British man and Stevenson. She complains of being confused. A pencil is put in her hand, but she does not write for Livingstone. Second trance vision. Elizabeth appears very confused in her ideas. Note that at this time Stevenson seemed to stand the co-partnership quite well. His work is clear. We must interpret the pulling and tugging as a pantomime, suggesting that all is not well yet. When the two memory streams come too near to each other, confusion results in Elizabeth's mind. Livingstone's references were too brief to be of evidential value. December 11, 1925. Raps, conversation with W.T. Stead. I was awful mixed up tonight. Stevenson was kind of rattled. I saw him talking to two men. They seemed to be medical men. He did not speak to me, nor I to him. Second transcript. David Livingstone writes, Bakalahari, dry village. David Livingstone speaks. Good evening. Buwala Tua, dry desert, springboks, monkey, guinea fowl, lupo, June 1849. Second trance, first vision. I was among the monkeys. They were in the grass and some other things, and some hens with pretty feathers like fancy birds, guinea hens, and another animal, brownish, not a monkey. It was a bright day and warm. Verification. A few villages of the Bakalahari were found, and great numbers of palas, springboks, guinea fowl, and small monkeys. Lopipi came next. This is from Missionary Travels, page 47. David Livingstone left the mission station at Kolobeng June 1st, 1849, and started to explore the Kalahari Desert. This is from Missionary Travels, page 47. David Livingstone speaks. Presented King of Portugal, Prince Consort, His Royal Highness, some of our great breed. Second trance, second vision. I had a beautiful picture the night. They seemed to be military men. I saw one all gaily colored. I saw a lot of Negroes. It seemed a sort of festival. I saw Livingstone, the only one I knew. The man with the brightest colors was walking about like a peacock, showing his beautiful coat and hat. Gold was on the hat, and he carried something in his hand. I think it was a sword. Livingstone was with these gaily dressed men. Stevenson did not appear. There was a building all brilliantly colored. Again, conclusive proof that the communicator selects what he wishes from his text for vision purposes. Here in the vision is a playlet based on the idea of a king or royalty, the gay trappings merely part of the play. Note, this is Livingstone's first bit of whimsy. December 13, 1925, third trance vision. They were at the foot of a hill. Stevenson seemed to push Livingstone aside. Then Stevenson talked to an old lady. I don't know where she came in. He gave her a paper to read. I was kept there with him talking to the old lady and getting this paper. An awful mix-up. I had both of them together, and Stevenson was mad. They are as bad as two kids. I just watched them. I did not take any part in the scrap. I was more looking at the hill. That hill belonged to Stevenson's picture. Thus we discovered that the struggle between the two communicators, like all the rest of the imagery, is pure illusion, meant to signify the fact that they found it difficult to use the one trance sleep, one after the other. Why this confusion? We can only surmise that they were not fully aware of where one hypnotic impact ended and the other began. Future trials along these lines solidified this possible explanation. Dr. Hamilton had been working with trances in Elizabeth for some time, and with typical thoroughness, and he illustrated what he found in some graphs of his observations. January 7, 1926. In the vision, Stevenson took Elizabeth away into a favorite place, Skerryvore, in a good-sized house. She saw the lighthouse plain, went away in another place, saw some men, they were doctors. He seemed quite happy with the last gentleman. David Livingstone does not appear. Elizabeth went home, very tired from the sitting. She went to bed, but after about 4 a.m. she found herself awake, saw Livingstone standing in front of her. She felt he wanted her to write. She got out of bed, found pencil and paper, and wrote. Hot wind on the desert, states of atmosphere, reached Little Baruba, cave of Lipo Loli, superstition. There were no punctuation marks. This was true of all Elizabeth's scripts. She said that while writing she had the feeling of walking on sand, of sinking in it, of it being awfully hot, of seeing naked folk drawing something, and then a breeze springing up. She phoned Lillian at 9 a.m. on January 8, and she described this experience. In the afternoon she brought the script to Lillian. Verification. Occasionally, during the very dry season, a hot wind blows over the desert. It feels as if it came from an oven. When this hot wind is blowing, the peculiarly strong electrical state of the atmosphere causes the movement of a native in his kaross to produce therein a stream of small sparks. Near the village there exists a cave named Lepololi. No one dared to enter the cave, for it was a common belief that it was the habitation of a deity. This is from Missionary Travels, page 108. A psychohypnotic impact originating with David Livingstone is strongly indicated. In this experience, the sensory impressions are as strong and as evidential as those that appear in the seance. This suggests that the normal sleep appears to be a gateway to trance, into which Elizabeth probably passed while writing. When questioned, she said she could not remember whether she had slept while writing. She was more overcome with seeing Livingstone in her room, but this was likely a hallucination, a subjective experience. This suggests also that dreams, all through the ages, may at times be based on external stimuli. Primitive people may well have been correct in assuming that their dead friends lived on and often spoke to them in this manner. Also, Rapp spelled out intelligent messages claiming to come from W.T. Stead, who had insisted that we carry out certain photoplate experiments under his direction. W.T. Stead had been an English journalist of great fame and some notoriety. He had spent time in prison for buying a British girl with the knowledge and help of the Salvation Army. His purpose had been to illustrate to the public how easily it was possible to buy someone in England for nefarious sexual purposes. He wrote about the experience, and the English legal system responded by changing the laws to protect people from such trauma, but not before he was charged and convicted, not for the purchase of the girl, but for not getting the father's permission before he bought her. Property rights came before human rights in the England of his day. Needless to say, there was never any hint that he actually used the girl. His rectitude in his relationship with his own family was exemplary. During the time he was in prison over the Christmas season, his family came to visit him, and he spent the time, as always, in the loving circle that he had created. He was an exemplary man, beloved by many in both low places and high. He corresponded with kings and commoners, government officials and shopkeepers. He wrote in a small newspaper away from large cities that had more influence in England of his day than most of the large newspapers of London or any major city. And he died in 1912 on the Titanic on his way to America to take part in a major human rights convention at the invitation of the President of the United States. He had also been much more than a dabbler in psychism. He was a sort of combination of theosophist and spiritualist, with a strong propensity to experiment. He developed the ability to do automatic writing, and was not shy about telling the world what he was doing. He was convinced of human survival after physical death, and he became a bit of a bore on the subject to many who otherwise greatly admired him. One kind of experiment that he had been particularly successful with was the placing of images on photographic film in a camera or in a package separate from any camera. When the ordinarily unexposed film was developed, it was often found to contain images of individuals who had passed on before the experiment was done. Now, after physical death, from the other side of life, he was attempting to do the same in the Hamilton Circle. To this end, he kept after the circle to keep up the experimentation by placing film and cameras during seances and not opening the shutter before the film was developed. It was the one part of the Hamilton experiments that was never successful. After about 6 months of intensive experimentation, the project was dropped at Stead's request. He had been able to do, when in life, something he was unable to do after his death. January 10, 1926, 10:08 p.m., trance developing, singing softly. By 10:10 p.m., Elizabeth gets up, goes to the door, knocks. Dr. Hamilton invites her to speak. Elizabeth tries to speak, but it's too hard to decipher. Second trance vision, David Livingstone. I saw all kinds of people. A lot of sick people, women and children in the funniest little square tents. The women are dark and the babies are not dark but pretty near it. I don't know what plague of trouble was there, but a lot were sick. There were 2 or 3 different tents for the babies. The tents are not very high, but square tops. I saw some kiddies, not black but color and very curly hair. The beds seemed made of wood with canvas. They sure were awful-looking places, not clean. Some were lying just on the ground. They took some of the babies to the side and washed them in a stream of water. I saw one mother. She got up and took the baby to the water and washed it. She had big earrings in her ears and a dress with some colors, just a colored piece of cloth. It pretty well covered her. Flashlight photograph taken of levitated and inverted table. Plate negative. This is the non-light experiment. No results. This is likely an experiment of Stead's. As Elizabeth looked down out following the sitting of January 24, 1926, and as we wished to see if the flash had any effect upon her nervous system, we prevailed upon her to remain for the night. She slept with Lillian Hamilton. They retired about 12:30 a.m. Mrs. Poole complained of feeling queer from head to toe, and as she dozed, Lillian observed her displaying numerous muscular twitchings and sudden starts. Lillian finally fell asleep, only to be awakened by Elizabeth saying, "There is Stevenson." Her hands were making a pushing movement away from her face, and she was making the sh 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 noise always observed in the initial stages of her trance. Lillian Hamilton watched these proceedings in amazement. The deep sleep of trance quickly followed. For about 3 minutes she lay in profound slumber with her hands thrown above her head. Then the right hand began to grope here and there. Lillian took a pencil which happened to be on the bedside table, reached for a book, since they were lacking any paper, and placed these on Elizabeth's pillow. The hand seized the pencil and began to write. When the writing finished, Elizabeth rapidly regained consciousness. Lillian questioned her. "Did you have a dream, Elizabeth?" Mrs. Poole: "There was someone with me. It was Stevenson. He is so pleased about something. He had a little stout, fair woman with him. I feel much better. He helped me." Lillian then got up, turned on the light, and read the script. This is on January 25th, 1:15 a.m. "It you cummy, my first wife, my mother." This was written in trance while sleeping. The following morning, Lillian asked Mrs. Poole, "Were you awake last night when you saw Stevenson?" Elizabeth: "Oh yes, I was awake all right." She did not seem to be aware at all that she had been entranced. High-speed flashlight photograph taken of levitated table. January 28, 1926. Mrs. Mary Marshall was present. Stevenson learning to write. Lloyd Osborne in the picture. David Livingstone does not appear. March 7, 1926. Elizabeth is at this time perturbed over the fear that some sitters are tired of Stevenson's messages, wants to quit. Stevenson, first transcript. "Do not fear, my little friend, for in spirit, not a ghost. Discretion tested by 100 secrets." First transvision. "I had a wonderful picture. I had him standing here quite close and his hand on my right shoulder, and he spoke right out. Then I was away and I saw his wife drawing in color on an easel. Then I seemed to come back and he was standing here beside me. I don't know what he said. He wasn't cross with me. He was pleasant. He was different than in a picture. He seemed purer. I don't know when anything was so soothing as going under. I remember another head and form over my head. I tried to knock it off, but it did not go altogether, but it came back and was very pleasant." The striking feature of this Stevenson transmission is Elizabeth's awareness of Stevenson as an actual personality, not just as a mind giving her pictures. From time to time, she had insisted that there was a real Stevenson, and the man she saw in her pictures, a man she sensed was a picture and nothing more, although she could not put her own impressions into words. Now here, while she was in her trance sleep, was a real being who stood beside her and spoke to her, telling her not to fear, for he was not a ghost, but a spiritual being whose knowledge of the intercommunication process was not a secret, but used with discretion. This suggests that this personal message to Elizabeth of reassurance had been prompted by Elizabeth's earlier signs of nervousness, both during the production of physical phenomena, the table levitations and inversions, which had been very strong, and in some of the trance visions, which had been unpleasant. Now she found her fears vanishing, and taking on trance became a more pleasurable experience. Trance 2, David Livingstone speaks. Good evening, Banguata. Through the Unicorn Pass. Honorable English gentleman, Gordon Cumming. Bushmen carry water. Second trance vision. I was away on some hills when I went away along through a narrow pathway. There were some people, blacks, and 2 British gentlemen, Livingstone and another with them. We came away on and I saw the funniest women. I don't know what they were carrying. I think it was water. I don't know. I think I saw ostriches too. Some big birds anyway. The women were carrying the water on their back and the gentlemen came up. They went forward and turned on the water and drank out of something they had in their pockets. It was wooden. It wasn't glass or tin. I don't know how they turned on the water. The water bag was about the size of the woman's back. The women had awful looking heads. They never had a comb through, I am sure. Verification. In passing through these hills, Bangawato, on our way north, we enter a pass named Unicorn Pass. They, the English hunters, paid their guides and assistants so punctually, the natives knew so well that an Englishman would pay, that they depended implicitly on their word of honor. Mr. Gordon Cumming among the hunters, the Bushmen supplied them with water. March 26, 1926. One trance used by both communicators. Confusion, Livingstone and Stevenson vision. Stevenson writes and gives vision. Livingstone appears in the vision. Livingstone writes and Stevenson breaks into his writing and writes a few words in the Stevenson handwriting. I had trouble with one of them. Stevenson came first and then David butted in. I was in the family house. I saw the boy Stevenson. He was 8 or 9 and his nurse was reading to him. Second transcript. The women of the Bakolo don't have to work. Indeed, the families of the nation are spread over the country, 1 or 2 in each village, as the lords of the land. They all have leadership over a great number of subjected tribes. See Missionary Travels, page 162. Second transvision. I saw an awful lot of women. They seemed to be better dressed than some of them. I got Stevenson back after the blacks. He was a young man and he spoke to me. That picture, Livingstone's, was not nearly so good as the one before, of Stevenson. This is the first time Stevenson enters the Livingstone trance. March 28, 1926. Usual charging followed by rapid sideways ejection of the table. Note Elizabeth's look of pain and tension. When an object is raised by muscular force, the use of that energy results in minute electrochemical changes in the muscles, causing a little fatigue. When the table was raised by psychic force, Elizabeth exhibited a marked degree of exhaustion. Also, some of the sitters suddenly felt extremely tired, a secondary phenomenon often noted in telekinetic experiments. With very violent action, Elizabeth appeared to lose consciousness briefly, suggesting that she might be in near trance. Similar observations noted by earlier investigators Crawford, Crooks, Oste, Jaley, Schrenk-Notzing, Madame Bisson, and Crandon. In the hundreds of table movements in the Hamilton work, not once was anyone ever struck. It is ridiculous to suggest that a table by itself has any will or choice, but the energy producing the movement showed a form of intelligence which determined the direction of the table movement. As did earlier investigators, Dr. Hamilton surmised that the probable cause of these violent movements was due to teleplasm in an invisible form, extending as a cord from the medium's body, to materialize after it had reached the table. He also thought some sort of storing or accumulating process was going on, either in the cabinet wood or the wood of the table to be the source of additional energy that helped to cause these remarkably speedy, powerful action. April 2nd, 1926. Impromptu sitting at the home of Professor W.T. Allison, 600 Gertrude Street, Winnipeg. Stevenson. Direct message to the group. Stevenson is awful mad over something you must not do. There he is standing with a book in one hand and the other on the table. He came back for this picture and is very angry. I could see his hair falling over one eye. Note, this is unexpected criticism. At the regular sitting, April 1st, a very powerful, partially developed male medium was placed in the cabinet for a short time for experimental purposes. The telekinetic power was extremely vigorous. Loud blows were struck on the back cabinet wall. All were interested, but not Stevenson. April 8, 1926. Dr. Hamilton was absent. Mary Marshall was present and manifest first deep trance, has Stevenson vision. Magazine emerged, yellow cover, maiden number, edited. First trance vision. I saw the prettiest hall all done in silver. I saw some girls. They were very old-fashioned. One had her hair in a net. They had on long dresses, and one had lace mitts. They were 4 girls, and they all had books. One of them opened her book and gave a kind of smile. They were like magazines, paper-covered. The centers were yellowish cream. Oh, it was so pretty. Stevenson was in his teens. He was just looking on. Verification. The magazine appeared in a yellow cover, which was the best part of it, for at least it was unassuming. It ran for 4 months in undisturbed obscurity and died without a gasp. The first number was edited by all 4 of us with prodigious bustle. The second fell principally into the hands of Ferris and me. The third I edited alone, and it has long been a solemn question who it was that edited the 4th. Poor harmless paper so clumsily defaced with nonsense. I had sent a copy to that lady with whom my heart was at that time somewhat engaged, and she, with some tact, passed over the gift and my cherished contribution in silence. A very brilliant piece of planned pantomime. By adding the word maiden number to the script, the communicator stressed the basic memory and laid the foundation for a playlet which most cleverly and whimsically covered that memory. Actually, it is a play on the word maiden, but so designed as to represent these plain memories as well. The 4 maiden numbers are depicted by 4 maidens holding magazines. Yellow covers, yellowish cream covers. Stevenson as past editor, Stevenson the present editor. The smile, the tact and silence toward the lady held in memory. Stevenson is still the literary designer in the world beyond death. There appears to be no other explanation or hypothesis that will account totally for the amazing outflow through an illiterate woman who returns from trance sleep with no memory whatsoever of what the Stevenson memory was. Never before in the history of mankind have mental phenomena appeared which demonstrate so irrefutably transcendental mind impact. One's mind therefore must make the one final leap and accept the fact that a living Stevenson is functioning. The same attitude is valid for the Livingston outflow. Dr. Hamilton was absent for this sitting of April 8, 1926. Lillian was note-taker in his place. His absence in no way interfered with the manifestation of the script and vision phenomena. David Livingstone does not appear this day. Because it would take a great deal of video time to cover all the events and messages, we leave this part of the work now. Anyone interested in the details of these further communications is encouraged to read the Hamilton notes. This is suggested in any case. There is no better way to get the feel of the work as it progressed than by reading these detailed notes. The communications from Stevenson and Livingstone continued for a number of years after 1926, and even into the time when Walter took over the experiments. In 1926 came the first invitation to lecture publicly on Dr. Hamilton's findings concerning the Elizabeth Poole mediumship. This invitation was from the Manitoba Medical Association. For Dr. Hamilton to consider making public this report of his 5 years' work took rare courage indeed, for he expected at the least ridicule and possibly open hostility. Most reluctantly, he gave his first semi-public lecture to the Winnipeg Medical Society in April 1926. That first lecture was on the topic of Mrs. Poole's telekinesis. As he said, I did not know whether I would have a shred of professional prestige left when I was through. As it turned out, his audience doubted neither his sanity nor his sincerity, and listened with tolerance and well-balanced skepticism. He was accorded a respectful hearing from an intensely interested audience of medical colleagues, and at the end of the lecture received their warmest congratulations. Soon a number of Dr. Hamilton's medical colleagues shared his interest and took some part in his researches. Men of the professional standing of Dr. Ross Mitchell, Dr. A.M. Campbell, Dr. Bruce Chown, Dr. Gordon Chown, Dr. Rennie Swan, Dr. A.R. Winram, Dr. William Creighton, and others. Also men of the cloth such as Reverend E.G.D. Freeman and Reverend W.R. Woods. 2 lawyers who voiced openly their interest and support were Isaac Pitblado and H.A.V. Green, both QCs. May 21, 1926. Dr. Hamilton gave a brief talk before the Winnipeg Art Club. Walter J. Phillips, artist, at that time at Banff, invited Dr. Hamilton. Around 125 doctors were present. Dr. Hamilton shows lantern slides of levitated table, gives history of discovery of psychic force by Crooks, Crawford, Flammarion, and others. He makes no mention of survival. Dr. William Boyd makes a fine speech of congratulations. Others were more at ease as a result of this speech. June 1, 1926. Stevenson and Livingston in one trance. The long struggle for the 2 communicators to work in one trance without confusion seems to have been accomplished. About this time, Elizabeth began to call her 2 companions Stevie and Livy, apparently at their suggestion. This is the first time Stevenson does not use any memory ideas. By June, after 9 months from Livingston's first appearance, and after some dozen separate attempts to use the one trance, a new step forward has been achieved. Elizabeth, awakening from deep trance, is now able to describe in detail both the vision experiences, one for Stevenson, one for Livingston, without pause. This also marks a splendid triumph for Elizabeth's carrying powers as well. July 18, 1926. Beginning use of the phonograph to provide music. Editor's note: the group sang during the seances because the energy of the singing helped the communicators. Now they added a phonograph to the seance equipment to aid in keeping up the energy. At this point, W.T. Stead now enters the trance sleep as a communicator. From now on, there will be 3 trance intervals. The communicators are asked to write the names of those present. The names W.T. Stead, R.L. Stevenson, and David Livingston are written. Elizabeth sees W.T. Stead in a vision. W.T. Stead claims to be using the Elizabeth Poole trance automatisms. July 22, 1926. W.T. Stead gives instructions for seance procedure. Place a large vessel with water to moisten the room. July 28, 1926. Stevenson, Livingston, and Stead are shown as coming in at various times. The script is written by Elizabeth in trance. The Stead script. My work is begun. This sphere is beautiful for all of us. W.T. Stead. Your stops are too frequent. It takes too much out of all of us. Keep your same number of friends if you want good pictures. It will take time. The Stead vision. I saw Stead. He was making some kind of picture, and then he showed it, and an angel was in the picture. I could scarcely explain the color. I don't know what was beneath the angel. I was amongst those who looked at it. Stead was talking. I don't know what he said. Stead was an old friend. He had come first in October 1920 with Myers by way of table tilts, then by raps with Myers in 1921 to 1922, by raps again in 1925 and early 1926. He seemed determined that we go forward with a new work, that of securing materialization phenomena. Lillian noted, we had no reason to suspect that such would occur in our seance room. Verification. Graph with caption, Dr. T. Glenn Hamilton's chart of typical Elizabeth procedure after W. T. Stead became third major communicator July 28, 1926. Stead appeared to be interested primarily in physical experiments, not in giving evidence for continuing memory and imagination and will. The chart begins on the date of October 3, 1926. The time is given as 9 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. It appears to cover a period of 1 hour in 5-minute increments. Then there is a single sheet of automatic writing. My work has begun. This sphere is August 1st, 1926, first transvision. I'm thinking of a picture. I saw Stevenson in that beautiful place. He has left me for some time. He said he was coming back. I just saw him in a bright blue. He had on a bluish coat from the neck down. Elizabeth was now in semi-trance. Now I see him again. I see the light and rising ground in the distance. Here is Stevenson. He is shaking my hand. He is going up the ground. He is gone. Elizabeth, when normal, said, Stevenson is not well pleased because so many interfering with his work. Livingston takes too much. He is too determined. Stevenson has gone to another sphere. He says goodbye. Stead script. You must have a proper sitting, 5 or 7, steady, if you want good results in your work. 5 is better if they are good ones. Your medium must be kept cheerful before her sittings. Do not disturb her mind. Have people you can rely on. Now there was an interval of 4 sittings at which Stevenson does not appear nor give visions. He was absent on August 5th, 8th, 12th, and 15th. August 5th, 1926. W. T. Stead in second trance. More instructions from Stead. Script. Have all good Christian people, not failing. WTS. Elizabeth sees Stead in bluish robes. Stead second trance. More automatic writing. Instruction, read your work. August 18, 1926. Stead writes to invisible entity and rebukes it. Writes welcome to Lillian Hamilton, who has been away. Third transcript. Sing of the old psalms and hymns for good results. None of this artificial music. W. T. Stead. Another sheet of automatic writing. You must not make changes in your group again. August 12, 1926. W. T. Stead. Spare me not, my Savior. You must not enter your classroom until your class is gathered. Start at 9 p.m. and rise at 10:30 p.m. Do not tire your medium. This is the better land. W. T. Stead. Stead, another bit of automatic writing. You must keep the right number. August 15, 1926. Livingston and W. T. Stead in one trance. Livingston script. Anniversary of the resurrection of our Savior observed the 16th of April. Portuguese rejoiced. No priests at Kasangi. Residence of the Commission at 10 a.m. Livingston Vision. Livingston had like a church parade, and an awful lot of blacks turned out, and quite a few were playing their trumpets. Stevenson came in 2 or 3 times. He was just watching. Verification. The anniversary of the resurrection of our Savior was observed on the 16th April as a day of rejoicing, though the Portuguese have no priests at Kasangi. The colored population, dressed in their gayest clothing, made visits to all the principal merchants. At 10 a.m. we went to the residence of the commandant. 2 guns commenced firing. Trumpets sounded. This is from Missionary Travels, page 320. Stead. Script. O Lord, save me from the depths. Nearer, my God, to Thee. William Thomas Stead. Elizabeth has a vision of a sinking ship. Note, Stead lost his life in the sinking of the Titanic in 1912. Don't place your medium in more than one trance. August 19, 1926. These notes seem to be a muddle. Singing at the end of the 3rd hymn, Elizabeth Poole was in deep trance and whispered a few unintelligible words, then began writing. She continued for about 10 minutes, writing quickly, evenly, and carefully. Then she appeared to be under a different control as she muttered and patted Dr. Hamilton on the back in a very different manner. Dr. Hamilton said, "Stead, we want those names again that you gave us. We could not make them out." Then Mrs. Poole began to recover from the trance, but in a moment appeared to be very restless. She gradually recovered and began to talk. She said, "I saw Stevenson. He doesn't like something." Verification. Stevenson returns, shown to have knowledge about present-day gossip regarding Stevenson in San Francisco. The Hamiltons were very astonished, as this was known only to Lillian and Dr. Hamilton, and had been discovered by Lillian in San Francisco in the summer of 1926 when she visited Stevenson's stepdaughter, Mrs. Salisbury Field. The script. My widow has a reputation. His statement reveals reserve and a non-committal attitude. He tried all he could to get in ahead of Livingston. There were others. I saw 4, Stead and Mr. Copperface. Stevenson came in, but I can't tell whether he gave me anything or not. I just saw his face. He wants Copperface and Livingston out of the way. Stead was there too, but I didn't get any picture from Stevenson. There were too many together. It spoiled it. Stead told me something. Mr. Molyneux spoke of a sensation of pressure on his neck. In a moment or two, Mrs. Poole was in deep trance, then began to cough violently. Then she said, "Go away, go away." Dr. Hamilton said, "Write it down," and she wrote again. Dr. Hamilton, "Who is here now?" An unintelligible whisper. Then she recovered. She had seen Stevenson and the Copperface. I saw them all again, the 4. No pictures. Stevenson and Stead talked to me. The vision is entirely imaginative, but based on facts. Lillian comments, one surmises that after physical death, the power of mental suggestion becomes immeasurably strong for those who know how to use it. In life, both Stevenson and Livingston were men of tremendous willpower. Happily, they used it for good. August 29, 1926, Stead. Light is not good for the sitting room with your class. From now on, the 3 appeared in the order, Stevenson first, Livingston second, and Stead third. Occasionally, Stead used a second trance. The following order was noted. First, Elizabeth takes on excitement stage. Then there is motor retardation. Then brief catalepsy of face and arm muscles, meaning that the face and muscles become fixed. Then there is muscular relaxation. And finally, deep sleep. The sleep shows 3 activities and sections. Elizabeth receives the Stevenson vision. Elizabeth writes the Stevenson script. She then takes Livingston or Stead vision. Then she writes for Livingston or Stead. Then she receives the Stead vision and writes for Stead. Now she returns to normal consciousness and relates the vision experience covering each vision in sequence. She has no memory of writing the scripts. These are completely forgotten. September 3rd, 1926. A graph with a vertical axis labeled time record, horizontal axis name. The time axis ranges from 9 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. The names are Stevenson, Livingston, and Stead. The caption below the chart reads, Dr. Hamilton's chart of typical Elizabeth procedure after Stead became the third major communicator, July 28, 1926. Stead appeared to be interested primarily in physical experiments, not in giving evidence for continuing memory and imagination and will.